International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, Foreign Affairs Minister Ahmed Attaf has been received in Dakar by Senegal's President Bassirou Diomaye Faye, to whom he handed a letter from President Abdelmadjid Tebboune in which he expressed his readiness to work with him to give a new impetus to a new dynamic in the Algerian-Senegalese relations. The permanent representative of Algeria to the United Nations, Ambassador Ammar Ben Jama, has said that conflict prevention in Africa should be a priority while receiving adequate funding to enable the continent to respond effectively to the multifaceted threats, in particular terrorism. The International Court of Justice, the highest judicial body of the United Nations, said that it will issue a decision Saturday regarding South Africa's request to order Israel to cease fire in Gaza. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Samani. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has been received in Dakar by the Senegal's President, Mr. Bassirou Diomaye Faye, to whom he handed a letter from the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune. During the meeting, Mr. Attaf also conveyed to the Senegalese President the sincere greetings of the President of the Republic and his readiness to work with him to give a new impetus to a new dynamic in the Algerian-Senegalese relations. Following the meeting, Mr. Attaf had this to say.
President Abdelmadjid Tebboune personally pays attention to the quality of Algerian-Senegalese relations as well as to their content and substance. President Abdelmadjid Tebboune pays attention to the imperative of sustained, regular and permanent political consultation between our two countries, given that they face the same challenges in all areas of common belonging. Finally, President Abdelmadjid Tebboune remains attentive to the proximity between Algeria and Senegal in helping us to assume our responsibilities and fulfill our duties in terms of peace, stability and prosperity for our continent.
Meanwhile, Mr. Attaf has co-chaired in Dakar a working session with his Senegalese counterpart, Yassine Fall, in his capacity as Special Envoy of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune. The meeting was devoted to consultation and coordination on a number of issues relating to bilateral relations and the prospects for their expansion to encompass new mutually beneficial areas. The two parties also examined the latest developments at continental level in anticipation of the next deadlines at the level of the African Union. On the instruction of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, the Minister of Justice, Abdelrashid Tabi, took part yesterday in the Chadian capital, N'Djamena, in the inauguration ceremony of Chadian President-elect Mohamed Idriss Déby Itno. At the ceremony, the Minister of Justice congratulated the Chadian President on behalf of the President of the Republic and reiterated President Tebboune's invitation to him to pay an official visit to Algeria. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has entrusted the Speaker of the Council of the Nation, Saleh Goujil, to sign the Register of Condolences following the death of Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi. In the Register of Condolences, Mr. Goujil wrote that it was with great sadness and deep sorrow that we have learned of the death of the President of the Republic of Iran, a brotherly country, Ibrahim Raisi, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Hossein Amir Abdullahian, and their companions in a helicopter crash. As part of his visit to the 2nd Military Region, the Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, General Said Chingriha, supervised Wednesday evening a night tactical exercise with live firing entitled Shihab 2024 at the 2nd Firing and Maneuvering Range at Rjem Damouche. The Army General heard presentations by the commander of the 2nd Military Region and the commander of the 38th Mechanized Infantry Brigade, respectively, on the general concept of the exercise and its implementation phases. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, as you followed in our top stories, the permanent representative of Algeria to the United Nations, Ambassador Ammar Benjama, has said that conflict prevention in Africa should be a priority while receiving adequate funding to enable the continent to respond effectively to the multifaceted threats, in particular terrorism. At an opening debate in the Security Council, on strengthening the role of African states in the face of global security and development challenges, Mr. Benjama said the following.
Sustainable peace requires a comprehensive, integrated, coherent and cross-pillar approach where development stands as a key pillar. Peace and development are mutually reinforcing. Conflict have a dramatic negative effect on the attainment of the SDGs. Conflict prevention in Africa should be prioritized and adequately financed in order to enable the continent to proactively respond to the multi-faced threat, including terrorism.
Mr. Benjama has said that strengthening cooperation between the UN and regional organizations in matters relating to the maintenance of international peace and security can enhance collective security. He added that the effectiveness of Resolution 2719 depended on its implementation in a fair and just manner.
Reinforcing the cooperation between the UN and regional organizations in matters relating to the maintenance of international peace and security can improve collective security. Therefore, the implementation of the Security Council Resolution 2719 provide an opportunity to foster the regional ownership by the African Union of the peace initiatives through a predictable, sustainable and flexible financing of the AU-led peace support operation.
For his part, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who attended the meeting, said that Africa is an important voice for the global good, adding that the continent is home to many examples of unity and solidarity in a fractured world. He also expressed the UN's full support with the African nation in its pursuit of peace.
Now is the time to unleash Africa's peace power. We need to strengthen Africa's peace leadership on the continent itself and on the global stage. First, we needed peace in Africa itself. Our partnership with Africa is based on the clear perception that we must work with the African Union based on the principle of African-led solutions for African problems. The United Nations fully supports Africa's pursuit of peace through the African Union's flagship Silencing the Guns initiative. We stand shoulder to shoulder with our African partners to help ensure security, stability and respect for human rights and rule of law across the continent in line with the new vision for the rule of law. We are working closely with the African Union to strengthen the foundations of stable, peaceful societies, including democratic processes and institutions that people can trust. And we are working closely with the African Union, ECOWAS and others to end the scourge of terrorism, including support for prevention, legal assistance, investigations, prosecutions, reintegration, rehabilitation and human rights protection.
That was the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres speaking. Now, more than 190 countries agreed on what the UN described as a historic treaty on patents to combat biopiracy and the plundering of genetic resources. At the end of the conference, which concluded with the adoption of this historic treaty on intellectual property, genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge, the permanent representative of Algeria to the United Nations Office and international organizations in Geneva, Rachid Bledhen, underlined that Algeria intends to continue working with member states to promote the protection of genetic resources and traditional knowledge in order to contribute to the promotion of sustainable innovation. As thousands of families continue to flee Rafah left with little food or drinking water, humanitarian operations in the Gaza Strip are close to collapse. The World Food Programme has warned, noting that the Palestinian enclave urgently needs an influx of humanitarian aid to deal with this situation. More details in this report.
The UN Food Agency has warned that the offensive by the Zionist occupation army in the north and south of the Gaza Strip, as well as the closure of border crossings, will precipitate a humanitarian catastrophe and a worsening of hunger. Already on Wednesday, the Rome-based UN agency warned that humanitarian operations in Gaza are on the verge of collapse. According to the agency, the escalation of the military aggression in the south and parts of the north, as well as various problems at the border crossings, will precipitate a humanitarian catastrophe and a new famine. If food and humanitarian supplies do not begin to flow into Gaza, despair and hunger will spread, insisted the World Food Programme. This warning comes at a time when once again almost half of Rafah's population, more than 800,000 people, are on the move in search of food and shelter in the central areas of the Gaza Strip and Khan Yunis. However, there is currently no food distribution in southern Gaza, with the exception of a few limited stocks that are given to community kitchens for hot meals. The World Food Programme also said that it was unable to access its main warehouse in Rafah due to ongoing hostilities, while the closure of border crossings in the south means that virtually no food, fuel or aid is being delivered. Despite these access restrictions, the World Food Programme is endeavoring to distribute the remaining products to as many people as possible. 4 bakeries are also operating in Gaza City, providing essential bread in the north. Of the 16 bakeries that the World Food Programme runs in Gaza, only 10 are operating due to the lack of fuel and other basic necessities, says the World Food Programme.
The Israeli occupation army bombardments and ground fighting continued in the Gaza Strip today, while the International Court of Justice is due to rule or has an offensive in the besieged Palestinian territory ravaged by more than 7 months of war. At least 91 Palestinians have been killed and 210 others wounded in the last 24 hours in 9 massacres perpetrated by the Zionist occupation army in the besieged enclave. According to medical sources, this toll was given by hospitals, while several victims are still lying under the rubble in the streets and on the roads where ambulances and civil protection teams are unable to reach them. The toll of the aggression against the Gaza Strip since 7 October has reached 35,800 people and 80,200 wounded, in addition to thousands of missing people. Medical sources have appealed for fuel to be delivered to hospitals, warning that health services will halt within 2 hours on Friday at the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital because of the shortage of fuel threatening the lives of dozens of patients. The Commissioner General of the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, Filippo Lazzarini, has insisted in Tulkarem in the occupied West Bank on the protection of the Palestinians in Gaza against the savage aggression launched by the Zionist Army of Occupation, affirming his agency's commitment to support Palestinian refugees, Said Bouhazi reports.
During his visit to the Nur Shams and Tulkarem camps on Thursday, Filippo Lazzarini stressed the need to protect civilian and international installations, noting that the incursion into refugee camps by the Zionist occupation forces last month has seriously damaged the agency's infrastructure and services. Since the beginning of the total aggression of the Zionist occupation army against the Palestinian people since last October, in particular the war of extermination and massacres in the Gaza Strip, the Zionist entity has intensified its intrusions into towns, villages and refugee camps in the West Bank, notably in the governorates of Tulkarem, Jenin, Nablus and Tubas, whose infrastructures have been devastated or completely destroyed, as well as the property of Palestinians. On Thursday, the Zionist occupation forces withdrew from the town and camp of Jenin after 2 days of aggression, murdering 12 Palestinians, including 4 children, a teacher and a doctor, wounding and arresting dozens of others, and causing serious material damage to the streets, infrastructure, and the property of Palestinians, Wafa added.
The International Court of Justice, the highest judicial body of the United Nations, ruled that Israel should halt its offensive in Rafah in a session held on Friday in The Hague. Judge Nawaf Salam, who led the court's hearing, quoted UN officials who repeatedly underscored the humanitarian risks of the military offensive in Rafah, where some 800,000 Palestinians are displaced. He cited the Palestinian people were in an immediate risk. The International Court of Justice will issue a decision Saturday, tomorrow, regarding South Africa's request to order Israel to cease fire in Gaza. South Africa wants the court to order Israel to immediately stop all military operations in Gaza, including the city of Rafah, where it began a ground onslaught on May 7 despite the opposition of the international community. South Africa had asked the court to urge Israel to immediately withdraw its forces and stop its military attack on Rafah, and to immediately take all effective measures to ensure unimpeded humanitarian access to Gaza. It also asked the court to issue an order to Israel to allow UN officials and organizations providing humanitarian aid, as well as journalists and investigators, to enter the Strip without hindrance. Now, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has described the recognition of the State of Palestine by Spain, Ireland and Norway as historic, saying it will have a positive effect for peace efforts in the Middle East. He said this joint decision is historic on two counts. It does justice to the claim of an entire people recognized by more than 140 countries for its right to self-determination. The decision by 3 European countries to recognize the State of Palestine opens a tangible step towards self-determination for the Palestinian people, writes the British daily The Guardian, describing the coordinated announcement of the decision to recognize the State of Palestine as carefully choreographed gesture. The British daily points out that this action follows weeks of discussions between the Norwegian, Spanish and Irish governments. Said Bourazi has more details.
In an article entitled "What is the significance of the recognition of the State of Palestine by Spain, Norway and Ireland?" the authors consider that recognition is a tangible step towards a viable political path leading to self-determination for the Palestinian people. For the British daily, the most important thing for the Palestinians is perhaps something less tangible: acceptance of the fact that they have an explicit and fundamental right to self-determination, which does not require the authorization of the Zionist entity, noting in this respect that the latter is increasingly treated as a pariah and that it is increasingly isolated diplomatically. Recalling the central role played by Norway in Middle East diplomacy over the years, hosting the peace talks in the early 1990s that led to the Oslo Accords, the newspaper points out that in 2014 Sweden became the first EU country to recognize the State of Palestine. At the time, the Swedish foreign minister said, "This is an important step that confirms the Palestinians' right to self-determination. We hope that this will show the way to others." 8 other EU countries have already recognized the State of Palestine: Bulgaria, Cyprus, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Malta, Poland and Romania. Many countries already recognize Palestine as an independent state, but the momentum towards recognition, particularly among European countries, will have significant implications, said The Guardian.
The Spanish Congress of Deputies has voted by a majority the return to legality and active neutrality of Madrid with regard to the Western Sahara question, reports the Iberian daily El Independiente. The Popular Party PP has once again succeeded in isolating the Socialist Party of Spain from the Congress of Deputies in its reversal of position on the Western Sahara conflict and its new era of relations with Morocco, says the newspaper, which adds that the new left-wing coalition, Sumar, and the government's political partners, with the exception of Junts, have preferred to ally with the Popular Party and Vox to reject the the unilateral position adopted by the President of the Executive, Pedro Sanchez, in March 2022. This is Radio Algeria International. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye for now.